All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Nexus Insights, where we are focused on having authentic conversations with interesting people. I am very excited about our guest today, Miss Tami Sparks. I've gotten to know Tami, over the past couple of years through our business development group. She has been such a important part to where our group is at now, and I'm really excited to just talk to you because I think with what you do, you get exposed to a lot of businesses, and you get exposed to businesses in every walk of life. And I know you've been very focused on just business development for yourself, how you can help guide people from both a coaching standpoint with biz, but also just business in general. And so I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking to you and Josie both.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this is the first time I've met you, so I have no idea what you do. These guys don't have any idea what you do. I think Robert's basically the only person. So
I like to keep it a secret.
I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. One thing I want to try something new, because my goal with these, and we've talked about this over and over, is I want people to understand, and like we've been talking about with the business development group, is that you are already at someone's 10X. And there's a great book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. We talk about it on almost every podcast because it has been such a big part of what's driven me to start doing things like this and to really start leveraging our business. And so I know we're talking about that at our business development group, but I wanted to open up because I think this will guide kind of the way we go. We end up covering things from people's life and how they got to where they're at. but if you had one message, like if you could only share one thing to the entire world, but somehow magically everyone got to hear it, whether it was an idea, it was a concept, or something that's had the most positive impact in your life, what do you think that one thing would be that you'd want to share with people?
Yeah, I loved when you texted me this question, actually, because it made me really reflect back on why I'm here, right? And it's something I've actually been focusing on a lot this past 6 months, especially. How did I end up here versus where I know I could have realistically been? And I think just having a growth mindset with an insatiable desire to be better and do better no matter what, and the tenacity to never give up. So I know that's kind of like three things combined into one. But I think without any one of those three things, I wouldn't be where I am today.
And what do you think, where did that come from? So as you're talking about being better, doing better, never giving up, how did you develop that? And just kind of the thought process of, if this was getting out to the world somehow, why that? And where did that mentality and these ideas come from?
Yeah. And that's something else I've thought about a lot. So because of my background, literally is a miracle that I'm sitting here today. And my sister is nothing compared to where I'm at, right? So I have a very stark comparison. And I think, I'm not sure. I was really lucky that I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents on a ranch. And so I don't know if it was just part of that, homegrown, hardworking, they'd been together forever, kind of just difference in upbringing between my sister and I that helped that. But I can tell you when it started. So at about 16, I had a situation happen and I was like, oh, I am recreating the experience that I grew up in, and that's not how I want to be. And so I put myself in counseling at 16 because for whatever reason, something inside me was like, no, we're not going to do this. And it just never stopped from there. Now, after a lot of things that happened in my adult life, it's always just been the same. I have a certain idea about what I want my life to look like and the kind of parent I want to be and the kind of partner I want to be. And so just that insatiable desire to grow and be better.
What did you see? You mentioned your grandparents, and it's something that when I've been talking to people, it's always something, whether it's, direct parents or grandparents, or a lot of times. I know another friend that we'll be having on soon, my buddy Sam, he talks about his granddad. And granddad would say, what was it with your grandparents that really was influential for you?
I think consistency. They just modeled consistency. That we got up at the same time. My grandpa was an early riser and so was I. So I'd come out and he'd be reading a book and I would sit and color. TV wasn't a huge part of our life. It was just hard ranch work. And my Nana is literally the nicest person I've ever met. I always aspire to be my Nana because she's the person who remembers all the birthdays and all the anniversaries of all of our extended family and all of her friends. And she's so social and kind and giving and never has a bad thing to say about anybody. Between her and then my grandfather's just steadfastness, maybe. And again, just that consistency, hard work, just drive stood out to me.
No, you're good. No, I was looking at this, just making sure Josie's camera is working. I always freak out worrying about the technical stuff. And with that, so like now your grandparents, is that here? Tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where are you from and kind of what that looked like?
So mostly here. I was born in Polson and we lived in Helena for a minute. My mom was a single mom. Here the most part. So I moved to the Columbia Falls area in 2016, but I came back right as COVID was starting. So
yeah, and it's funny because I think obviously we've met through Biz, and I end up talking about Biz on every single one of these meetings because I've met so many great people. I think most of the guests we've had are just people I've met through Biz because I had Stephanie Sylvan on. She was our last guest, and then Sarah Brown from Saks CPA. She's a total sweetheart. Biz has been something that I feel like when people think of Biz, they actually think of you. You've kind of been like the linchpin that brings everything together. I know you've been so involved in developing it to what it is today. Why don't we talk a little bit about Biz? Because I think as people get an idea of what your role is and what you do there, I can't tell you guys how many times I've been like, man, it would be really nice if we had something like this in Biz or this, worksheet or this training. And Tammy's like, it's in the member center. It's already created. And I'm like, shit, I forgot to look at that, But yeah, so let's talk about what you do with Biz, because I think that's going to lead to a lot of like who you are as a person and how you've gotten to where you're at. So tell us a little bit about your role there and kind of what Biz is and how you envision it moving forward.
Yeah, my role is not really clear cut. When I started with Biz, so I was a member first, and Biz to Biz has historically been a networking organization that was industry specific, and the whole goal was to be able to pass referrals to one another and help each other grow. I hadn't drank the Kool-Aid per se until I met the founder of Biz and heard why it was started. Really, it was started based on mentorship and helping businesses be able to just navigate the treacherous waters that is owning a small business, right? And that was really impactful to me. And so I pushed to be able to work with them. And right from the get-go, I'm a big, be able to see the big picture, but then narrow down to the details too. And so I just instantly was like, oh man, we don't have any new member training. As a new member, I didn't have training. I just was told as the meeting was progressed, do this, right? And then even when I stepped into a leadership role, my training was kind of a 30-minute call saying, hey, do this, do that, and mail the stuff in every week.
And then, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you're talking about the training, what is that? Because I've never been to Biz to Biz. Yeah. Nobody watching this has probably ever been to it. And so do you train small business owners or what does that look like?
I do, actually. It just looks a little different. And so I created training around how to effectively give a commercial about your business if you're at a networking event, how to present or do public speaking, how to use the systems that we've developed to be able to track different things, how to facilitate a meeting, how to do a plethora of things, plus be able to do similar things like this with members so that I'm teasing out their kind of secret sauce in their business and recording it and putting it online for our members to be able to watch too. So when I say training, it's also developing training that leaders can give within our biz meetings, because our chapter meetings, they're about business development, skill development, but then also how do we help each other's businesses grow? So there's a lot that goes into making it flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing that for me, because, and this will kind of, I think, go deeper into your role and kind of what you do, but our biz chapter, just calling it what it is, was dying about a year ago. We were on the ropes. I think we were down to maybe 6 members, and we had dropped from a high of probably 15 to 17 at one point in time. And a lot of that had to do with just the way things were being run, leadership at that time, not taking away from the leader who was there, great guy, friend of mine. It just is what it is. I think it was just one of the things that wasn't a priority. And there's also just kind of getting away from the systems. And I know when you had said, hey, I want to start plugging back in, that I think was really a big shift, because two things kind of happened at the same time for us. Is that one was you wanted to plug back in, and about a month before that, I know I've told this story to guys at Biz, but I don't know if I told it to the podcast world, is that I have a friend of mine who joined a networking club in Vegas where you had to make over $1 million to be in the club, and there was this business development group, and the membership fees were crazy. It was like $15,000 year one, then it was like $10,000 a year after that. And I just was assuming, oh my gosh, this must be something insane. There must be something crazy going on. I was like, tell me about this. What are you doing with that, man? He's like, well, basically we show up, there's probably about, 15 of us, whatever. There's a group of us that show up. Everyone goes around and like in a minute or two says what they do with their business and who they are. And then we have some type of training, or we hear from a member. And then it's really just more like afterwards, like, oh, if you want to talk more to someone, you can like meet up and network with them afterwards. And I was like, oh shit, you just described Biz, like that's exactly what we do. Yeah. And so for me, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, the secret sauce is it's just the expectations of the group. Mm-hmm. And I just started realizing is the only reason that this group was working so much better than what ours was is because people showed up, and there was a huge barrier to entry and a huge cost. But because there was a huge cost, people treated it with a lot more respect. And I think that's kind of been the mentality that we've been trying to shift in our group. And it's been going great. Like, I think even just this last meeting on Tuesday, I was like, this is how a biz meeting should run. Yeah, like, this is powerful. People are giving insights. We're coming together as a group of individuals with a common goal of how we can help each other out and a common direction of where we want to take it. Mm-hmm. And I think that has been a lot of just your guidance, because I think for us, when we were first starting it, is like I had an idea of what I wanted to be, but I am very much like a big picture person. And sometimes the details of bringing everything together are hard for me, because I'm just like, it'll work out. Whereas you, I feel like, are also like that, but you are also very good as like, let me kind of fill in the gaps of what I see lacking. And I think that your experience with working with so many different groups, all of the groups have a similar structure, but they're different in the way they run. So you are very good at looking at something and being like, this specific group needs this help. And so where did that come from? I know you've done some of the Maxwell training, and that's just a lot of just your self-development, but how'd you develop that? And I guess as you're answering that, for someone who's looking at this, because again, going back to 10X being easier than 2X, like if someone is watching trying to say like, that's a skill I want to have, like what did that look like for you to get to there? And how would you suggest, like if this was something someone's trying to learn, like these are steps that they could take?
So the short answer is, part of how I developed it was trial by fire. Like I fell down a lot. Under previous ownership, it was often this chapter's failing, go to it. And, there were times where I would walk in a room and maybe hadn't met these people. But when I walked in, like the daggers were at me, because I was representing Biz and they were pissed about their results and what was happening. And so,
what do you mean, like their results? What do you mean by that? And like what was happening?
Yeah, I love that question. So with Biz, we provide a strategy for the networking groups so that people can come together and help one another grow, but they don't have to recreate what all the tools, resources, agenda, all of the things that go into it, policies, admin. We do all of that. And then just guide the groups on how to make it useful. So
you were pissed when you came in?
Yes. And I will tell you why. So originally when Biz started, it was very regimented. So 3-member presentations. So you would get an opportunity to present about your business. And then the encouragement for the 4th meeting of the month was to do a training specifically from Biz to Biz. Well, if you have a group of people who've been together for a while and they've all done member presentations and they've all gone through the Biz training and they don't feel like the support is there from the home office, yes, people do get a little upset about them feeling like they're investing in something and not seeing the value. Mm-hmm. So, but because of those situations, I learned pretty quickly how to step in and read a room. As Robert knows, I actually lean pretty heavily into like determining people's personality within a few short minutes of meeting them so that I can adjust. And I guess if I had to say what's one thing somebody should do to like increase their results, no matter what situation they're in, is to learn about personalities and human behavior, because there's so many things that can go into communication, right? It's body language. It's the difference between somebody who's experienced trauma versus somebody who hasn't really, and how do you navigate that and tell what's a trauma response or just somebody kind of in their crap, you know what I mean? And so when you ask what's one thing, I would say that's one thing. Yeah. Really learning personality styles and those communication techniques around personality styles.
Well, because before biz, you had your own business, right? And so, and I mean, what did you, let's go back to, because I know we talked a little bit about, but like, what was childhood like for you? I mean, it sounds like there was things that were really great, but things that you were like, don't want that to happen. Like, what was that like growing up? And, you know, tell us a little bit about who you were as a kid.
Yeah. So, well, being a single mom and her growing up rough, and I think the generation there, she just didn't have a lot of parenting skills. So her parenting skills were hard.
Is your mom you're talking about? Mm-hmm. Okay. How old was your mom when you were born?
Late 20s, I think.
Okay. And you said you have a sister. Yep. Any other siblings?
No, okay. Just one sister. But because of kind of my mom's own personal stuff, she was with partners who were really rough too. So we experienced just a lot of neglect in particular from my sister's dad and some physical abuse and stuff like that. So I've just been more put in not great situations.
Yeah. And it's you know, it's unfortunate because I mean, talking to people and especially just in life, whether it's not even just podcasts, but just in life, it seems like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just the way the world has always been, or maybe just people talk more about it, but that is unfortunately a really common thing I hear from people. Yeah. It's just like the environments they grew up in, you know, and it's interesting. Even when I talk to my dad, my grandfather who's passed away, I grew up with my grandfather, my nano, as the most loving. He would walk up, give me the biggest hugs. He'd always slip a 20 into my hands as a kid. And my dad would be like, that's not the nano I grew up with. You know, he was like, your nano, he would beat the shit out of me. You know, he's like, your nano was a gambler. Your nano was, and I'll talk to my grandma, and this is all in love. Like we can look back and like, you know, but I never saw any of that. I didn't see the flaws. And it's like, but then my dad would talk about like, yeah, he would beat the shit out of me, Robert. And like, and it's just one of those things like, oh my gosh. And I think so often I'm talking to people who are around our age. Not you, Josie, you're a kid still. Yeah. But it seems very common that there's a lot of people I talk to who had kind of like that come to Jesus moment where it's like, I'm not doing that again. Yeah. This is stopping with me. And so it sounds like that was something for you that you kind of decided like, okay, I'm going to make a change. And like, we don't have to go in any more detail than you want to, but like when you were 16, like, was there anything where you're like, I need to make, like, what was it? Like, that's a very unique thing from a 16-year-old's perspective to be like, I need to get help. I need to get counseling. Like how did that come about?
Honestly, it was recreating relationships in my life that I had seen my mom have. Mm-hmm. Right. So like I was dating guy after guy and they were not good guys. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want that for my life. I wanted to be married to one person and have stability and just a solid life for the kids that I were to have, because I did want things to end with me. Mm-hmm. So that was the big thing for me.
Yeah. And then, so once you started, you know, seeing a counselor, did you feel like that was, I've talked to some people where they feel like counseling was really helpful. Some people were like, oh no, but it pointed me in a different direction. Like how did it help you, or did it just kind of shift the way you were moving as far as your life path?
I don't think it helped in the moment, except to open my eyes that there could be more. Right. And I think at that time, because of the trauma I'd experienced for so long, I really was in a place of still disassociating, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so when the questions got real, my reaction was to pretend like everything was great and I was great and everything was okay, because that was my learned response. Mm-hmm. Right. But I couldn't speak to that until I was a lot older.
Yeah. When did you start, like, because I know from talks, like you've spent a lot of time like self-developing, reading books. To me, I going back to that one thing that people could do, I feel like that has been one thing that has helped me so much, is just reading and understanding, like there's people who've already done everything you want and they wrote down exactly how they did it. And so you can collapse time frames by just reading what people have already written. How did that start for you?
Oh man. So how that really started for me, so I know that but my first husband died by suicide, right? But the events leading up to that made me really start deep diving into communication, actually, and how communication can break down between people. And then my eyes really got opened. I was a massage therapist at the time, working over at Health Source Chiropractic. And because it was like kind of the first franchise from a chiropractic standpoint, they had this big event. And people may not know this, but at the time, a lot of chiropractors were really deep into personal development. And so we had some amazing presenters who were chiropractors, but also were talking about how like neuro-linguistic programming, right? And how what you say impacts what you think, and what you think like impacts how you feel, and just that round robin result. And it was really a huge experience to me because it was the first time I'd been out of the state. Because of the kind of event it was, I was introduced to like extremely high caliber people. So in my early 20s, I was having this just impactful experience based on human behavior and how we can impact our results. So that was a huge pivotal moment for me. I was kind of all in at that point.
And you said you were how old?
Shortly after my husband passed away, so I must have been like 25, 26. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, that's I can only imagine. I mean, because again, we think back at life, and you know, I think back to where I was at 25, and again, that's why I give you crap because you're still so young. But like, I think about like I felt like I was still a kid. Like, oh my gosh! But then you have these huge things that are thrown on you, and that's one of those things where it's like no one expects like, oh, I'm going to be 25 and have this major life event that I'm going to have to somehow figure out how to handle. And I saw that a lot in the Army with my buddies, where when I joined the Army, I turned 26 my first week in basic training. So I was like an old man by Army standards. But that was the other thing I saw, is that like you'd see these guys who are kids. They're like, you know, team leaders who are 22 years old, 23 years old, but they've got 3 and 4, 5 deployments under their belt. They've been on, you know, hundreds of combat missions. I would talk to guys who it's like, oh yeah, I was in the surge to Iraq. When I was a 22-year-old kid, I was a gun team leader, and we were like going out and hitting targets. And you're like, you think about a 22-year-old kid doing something like that, and it's like, oh my gosh. And that's something too that like, I see people. I was just texting a friend of mine who was from the Ranger Regiment this morning, and we were talking about another guy who's also from battalion, and just the different ways that people respond to those major life traumas, where some people take it and do what you did, where it's like, I'm going to get better. And I think having solid examples of people to look up to show like this is possible makes a huge difference. But then some people respond very poorly, and they're like, oh, they just humdrum, or it's not great there. But I know for me too, it was kind of similar in that like I had a lot of people at a very young age who were showing me that like people who came from nothing and were making more money than I ever thought was even possible, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And they were showing us like, this is how I did it. And that to me, just seeing people who started from nothing and basically self-creating themselves are like, okay, this can be done by anyone with a little bit of hard work. And so I know for you, you've gone pretty deep into like the Maxwell training stuff. How did that come about, and how did you get plugged up with them?
Yeah. At the time I was a massage therapist and had my own business and just wasn't settled, and really considered going into business consulting because I just love business, and I had always found that anytime I was like running space for my chiropractor, I was focused more on their business aspect of things rather than necessarily doing massage. I just would get kind of bored. And I looked at a lot of different programs, and for whatever reason, the stuff within John Maxwell was the one that impacted me the most. And I don't know if it's just like the breadth of leadership stuff that he does or what it was, but funny enough, the most impact after being involved with John Maxwell wasn't necessarily him. It was the original faculty of the program. So Paul Martinelli became one of the people that I followed the most because his story was so impactful. He was a person who had not graduated high school, had been bullied and abused, had a really bad stutter growing up. And he started a business literally with a vacuum cleaner and built it to $1 million company, and subsequently has created many multi-million-dollar companies and sold them and stuff. And so just his like deep dives into Think and Grow Rich and cybernetics, I can't say it, but just still like that neuro-linguistic programming and how you can change what you think about yourself was really impactful. And then another faculty member, again, that personality assessment stuff, he really broke down how you're really created by the time you're about age 10. And so you have to be really intentional about changing those ingrained patterns from how you were raised and the stuff that was kind of inputted into your brain between birth and 10.
Is there anything, I know for me, when I look at my life, and just as we were prepping for this conversation, I was thinking there's a handful of key events in my life. Not that like I can look at as like my life changed right there. That was a point when I zigged where I could have zagged. And some of them, a lot of them have to do with coaches that I worked with. There's just one that sticks out glaringly to me, which was, I think I might have told this story before, but just the quick version is that when I was playing soccer, I played up. I was on a club team, and I was 13 playing on a U17 team. So I thought I was getting better. I was better than all my peers because I played up. When I went back and played at school, I crushed all my peers because I was playing with kids years older. Right. And so I thought I was really good. And then I went to this camp at Cal State Fullerton, and it was a camp where it was like for people just to come for a week. You stayed on the campus for the week. You ate there. You bucked there. You did everything. So it was training, but it was also designed to be where they could scout potential new recruits. And so everyone played hard because this was a chance to get picked up by a D1 school. And so I showed up my summer between 8th and 9th grade. And I thought I was going to do great. And at the end of they would grade everybody, and then they would give you like an assessment on a 1 to 10 scale. And I got like 2s and 3s across the board because they were saying like on a 1 to 10 scale, how would you play on a college team? And I was garbage. And it was so humbling to me. And one of the things that I will never forget is that like they had this drill where you had to dribble the soccer ball like across the field. So you can use both feet. You can just use your right foot. You can just use your left foot. You can only use your knees. And so they give you like constraint-led, it's like kind of a constraint-led approach. And I couldn't dribble the ball. Like I couldn't juggle, the ball at all. And so after that, I saw this report card, and it was so humbling for me because like I thought I was really good at this. And to have someone basically say like, you are garbage at the level that you're trying to play at. I went back, and no one made me do this but myself. I was like, I'm going to go train every day. And so every day after school, I'd go to the park and I would just practice. I would just practice on my own. And I went back to that camp the next year. And again, so now I'm between my 9th and 10th grade year. And there was a guy there, his name's Eddie Soto. He wouldn't know me from Adam. I guarantee he doesn't remember this, but I remember this. And we had to do a drill where we had to dribble across the field with juggle across the field. And I did it. And he walked over me. I didn't think he knew my name. He had a clipboard. He goes, "Hey, Robert, how's it feel to be on the winner's side?" Nice. And I just was like, it felt great. I was just like, so like, it was and it just proved to me, it's like all this work I did this last year paid off. And after that, I think I scored like 6s. I still wasn't doing great, but like, I was like, I'm making progress. I can, in the next 3 years, I could play D1. If I'm already at a 6, great, And so it just proved to me that things like could change, and I was in control of my destiny. And if I outworked people, I could do better. And so like, when I've been talking to people, I've seen a lot of times that there's a few key moments that people have is like, this impacted me. This made a huge difference. Like, is there anything that comes to mind for you? You're like, man, this happened and it changed the trajectory that I was on, in a huge way. Is there anything like that comes to mind for you?
No.
Putting you on the spot. It's all right. No worries.
No. Well, I think there's a really important reason why it's a no, though. Everything I've ever done my entire adult life has been for my kids. So for me, I grew up in a trailer. I didn't want the kids to grow up in a trailer. So I did whatever I could to make sure that they were raised in a house. And I know that seems kind of silly, but it meant a lot to me. And so I took steps to do that. If I got negative feedback about something I did or said, like I thought about how that came across as a parent. And so I made that shift. Maybe the most negative thing that was ever said to me that made me like dig in and be like, screw you, I'm going to make this better. Somebody one time told me that I was never going to be a coach, that I wasn't capable, that I was horrible with my communication, which, to be fair, I think she was wrong, right? But a little bit of projecting there. But I still just dug in and was like, whatever, I'm going to prove you wrong. So, but everything I've ever done has been about being a better example and showing my kids there's a different way of doing things.
Remind me, how many kids do you have again?
I have 5 and then a stepson.
So like if you were talking again, and why I love video content as well. Something I want to do with my clients. I was just talking with a gentleman about this who's in his 80s. Is like, I want to start having conversations with people who are just much further along in life, because I think there's so much that gets missed. But I also like doing these videos because the thought to me is always like, life is like this, you know, you don't know, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but people die all the time. And so I'm always excited to know that, like, heaven forbid if I die, that there's video content that my kids can go back, especially my son. He's only 7 and I know he'd remember me, but I want him to know who was dad. And but I think about like Charlie Kirk even, where like it was so sad when he got killed, and I think about how many people that went back and watched his content and saw what he stood for, and his kids being able to have that in the future. So like, I think that's really positive. But I guess like with your kids, you keep coming back to them, and that's such an important part to you. Like, if you could get one message to them and they heard it and it was like, hey, maybe they see this at 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but just like that message, you're like, I hope that they get this. What would that be?
I think that's hard to put into a short message, right?
It doesn't have to be short. Take your time.
I think it applies to everybody too. I think we always have the opportunity to do better as long as we want to, right? And that's something that I've tried to model for them, in that if I don't like how I'm reacting in certain situation, I have the opportunity to go back and own that and then do it different, right? But it has to be on me to do the work. And so I think the most important takeaway that anybody could have is that we are in control of our thoughts, reactions, and how we show up in this world. And if we consistently get met by the same challenge, that should be an awareness for us that we need to change something in ourselves, and that that's okay, because nobody's perfect. We're all human, but we were blessed with the opportunity to be self-reflective and to make changes.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So we are back. Part 2. Had to stop. Love it when cameras are overheating, figuring all that fun stuff out. But Josie, yeah, you guys were talking about something really interesting off camera. Why don't we pick up for what you guys are just going through?
Yeah, you like slightly hit on the fact that you're very interested in people's personalities, that it's helped you a ton, and that you just have been learning about it a lot. And I'm just kind of curious what you meant by that, because I think that kind of stuff is really interesting to me, but I've never dove into it, because I believe, and I think a lot of people believe this way, and it might be a misconception, that it's the same with astrology signs or anything like that, where it's like, well, that doesn't define who I am. That's not who I am. Like, I can be whatever I want to be. And so a lot of the times people, when they see like personality tests or stuff, they just kind of disregard it. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
I love that question. So I first got introduced to the idea of personality assessments when I first was with Biz. Because we used to do, when people would apply, the founder of Biz to Biz had created a program that was a little bit of DISC. Have you guys heard of the 5 love languages at all by chance? A little bit of 5 love languages. It was just kind of a mix of some different things, and we called it TOPS. And with that, I did a lot of the training in chapters around TOPS, and essentially it is DISC. So DISC dates back. The idea of personality assessments date back clear to ancient times, as far back as like Socrates. And at that time, they talked about it more of like a fluid level. So if you've heard the word like phlegmatic or melancholic, that was like the basis of this idea of DISC that really came into being in the 1920s. And from that, you get things like Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, kind of colors. There's one that's called birds. Like, there's all sorts of offshoots. But the idea behind it is that we do have about 4 personality types. D and I's tend to be more extroverted. And you can think of D's as like decisive, meaning they'll probably make quick decisions. They might talk in bullet points. Your eyes, I lovingly call butterflies because they're really hard to pin down. But they're also a little like puppy dogs. You can put them in a room full of 100 people that they don't know. They're going to walk out having 100 new best friends, right? So they're very extroverted. Your C's, often people in like financial advising are C's because things have to be accurate. They're analytical. They tend to like be processing people. And then your S's, think of S words. So stability, security, safety. So your D's and I's are a little more extroverted. Your C's and S's more introverted. D's and C's are task-based versus S's and I's that are people-based. And you guys work with clients. And so if you start paying attention to this stuff and you get into a deep dive about it, you really quickly can kind of determine the main personality type your clients fall into. And then you can mirror them easier and build rapport quicker. Is really what it boils down to. Because in just really short things, when I say I could tell who people primarily probably are based like within a few short minutes, if they're a D and a C, they're probably going to be early to any kind of meeting. Your I's will probably be late. Your S's on time or late, but for different reasons. Your I's are going to be overscheduled because they love everything to be fun, right? They're from this thing to the next thing to the next thing. And then they're like, oh crap, I have that other meeting. So they like buzz in, right? Versus your S's who might have been doing this, that, or the other thing for kids or animals. So they're overscheduled too, but it's for different reasons, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Do you see, because there've been so many books written on these kind of personality assessments. One that I was reading, we talked about at our last meeting, was Surrounded by Idiots. And it's all about personalities. And I get what you're saying too, because sometimes I'm like, oh, it's hokey pokey stuff. But then I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I see some things in myself where, I definitely am like, okay, I see that myself a little bit more. I'm like this and like that. But like, as far as books for you, has there been any ones that have been like, okay, this is the one that I kind of is my go-to for this type of training?
This is unfortunately where my disc stuff comes out because I tend to be more of an archetype thinker is what it's called. So for me, I take so much of this, that, and the other thing to make things make sense.
Where are you in DISC?
My C is actually highest, but then I'm an equal DS. So the assessments I have access to break it down into 41 personalities, and you can really get a picture of like who somebody is at their core, who they think they are out and about, and how they think people perceive them too. So
with what you're
in depth.
Yeah, and I'd be curious because I know you're doing more like coaching and training for businesses. Just kind of walking through, because one of the things I want people when they're seeing this is like, hey, that would be valuable to me. And then they know like a solid resource that they could reach out to. How do you use that information when you're walking in and you're talking with someone? And again, you work with people in all walks of life, all different businesses. What does that look like as far as a consult, and how you then take those types of personality-based tests and mix that with what you know about coaching and just everything about business? Like, what does that process look like, and how does it help the businesses you're working with?
Right. Well, I have a really, really good example right now. So biz to biz, we have leadership roles within biz. We have a president, vice president, chairperson. We can have a trainer, and we have mentors. It really used to be, while they all had their own jobs, like it still felt very like positional leadership focused versus looking at it from a strengths-based and task-based leadership perspective and making sure that we have kind of the right butts in the right seats, right? Mm-hmm. And I often throw myself under the bus because while I can stand up and facilitate and public speak, like having consistent energy to facilitate the meeting week in, week out with the same people is not my jam. Like, that's Robert's jam. I'm a way better vice president. He gets to be like the energy and focus in the room. I get to hold him accountable with emails and, hey, we said we were going to schedule things, right? So it's just that like being able to identify strengths and make sure that we're kind of in the right seats. And that directly applies to businesses. I think we have a really fascinating opportunity with all the things that we've learned, like through COVID, post-COVID, to really go away from how roles have been historically looked at. So I have a business that I am doing a project with, that there just is a lot of tension. And when you look at the position descriptions for the individual roles and then match them with those assessments, we just literally don't have the right people doing the right things. It's not that anyone's bad or anything like that. It's that somebody that's a high I probably should not be the person in charge of details, right? And so how do you take their strengths and be courageous enough to say, okay, these are our old role descriptions. Let's not do those anymore, right? And just think about when we're talking about 10x is better than 2x, right? Or easier than 2x. If you have the courage to do stuff like that, what are your results going to be?
Yeah. It's also the same authors. And again, I end up bringing these books up. And it's funny because these books, like, no offense to the authors, you guys ever hear this? I don't think they're so well written that it's like, oh, that was, but it's like the concepts are good. And there's another book written by the same author. It's called Who Not How.
Yep.
And so it's all about getting the right people in the right seats. And that's even like an example for me is the editing process. As you guys can see, we're still figuring stuff out. And I've been learning, but I've been slowly taking things of this off my plate and like, okay, I'm going to pay an editor. And it's like oh God, that's expensive, but it's freeing up things and it's making things better. I
think it's also hard too, because where I'm like learning, I hate organizational stuff. Details are not my thing. And that's a process that I have to learn, period. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of the times, even though people might not be details focused, I think isn't it still something that they have to learn regardless? Or, you know what I'm saying? Especially when it comes to like businesses.
Yeah, I think there's a balance though between up-leveling your skills and just acknowledging that maybe you should hire an assistant, right? So when we're talking about this 10x is easier than 2x, one of the stories in it is about a young person who got her real estate license and had no idea what that looked like, right? Yeah. And ended up going to conferences out of her state and was the first person in her area to hire an assistant because she didn't want to do the details, right? So I think it's a fine line between saying, these are skills I want to develop and I will make more money by focusing on these areas, right? So I think it's a balance of both.
And to piggyback off that, sorry to interrupt, but it's not just about, because making money, obviously, we all want to make more money. I know a lot of people who will listen to this over time. I think that's some of the things they're going to be coming from is trying to figure out ways to be more successful, but it's also having a better life. Like I've noticed with Grayson, who's one of the other advisors on our team. I don't think anyone here has ever seen Grayson. We're going to have him on soon. But Grayson and I, a few years back, decided we were going to 50-50 split everything that came through our office, which was a huge decision to make because at that point in time, I was making significantly more money than Grayson, but there were things that it was just too much for me to try and do because we were getting to the point where at that time I probably had, 300 or 400 households I was working with. And I think now we're over 700. But even if you get to the point where you have 400 people that you're working with, 400 households, and 1% of people have a question every day, that's 4 calls I have to field. That's 4 emails I have to respond to. And that's only of 1%. What if the market's going crazy and I have a big day and I've got, 3% of people? It's like, okay, that's 12 people now that I've got to get back to. And then there's processing things. And there's just so many moving parts where it's like, we would be better served if I handle all the forward-facing part of our business and you handle all the back office. Yeah. And since we did that, it opened up so much. And he has been an invaluable. I trust Grayson probably more than just about anyone in my life, other than my wife and my immediate family. But we've kind of like hooked our wagons up together, and it's like we're gonna ride together or we're gonna die together, one of the two, And so going back to this whole idea with finding the right people in the right roles, that is something that I've seen you've been talking more about, and you kind of hit on the historical roles, but I'm curious, like, what are you most excited for with Biz? Like, what do you see it being in a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What is that like? What does that look like for you?
I don't know why I love this company as much as I do. The last 3 years have been really exciting because it came under new ownership. So Jennifer Gilmore Sawyer currently owns it, and she's been part of Biz for a long time too. But I think what's exciting is the openness to expansion in a different way. And so before, where we were really like referral focused, it is about business development. And that's the thing that's exciting to me, being able to work with chapters and members to say, no, really, like in this next 6 months, how can we help your business grow? What does that look like for you? and then teach leaders how to take steps to have that happen within a group. That's what's exciting to me. It's just that help for small businesses.
Well, I was thinking too, were you there when we did Dayton's Hot Seat? I know you were traveling. Oh man. But that was a perfect example. And I feel like the last few meetings we've had, things are really starting to fall into place. But I know we had a couple visitors that day, but just to see a group of people from different businesses, different expertise, different levels of quote unquote success with where they're at, because we have some newer businesses. We have some people who've been around for a long time. Dayton being one of the newest people running a cleaning business. And just to have this group of individuals sit down and for, 35, 40 minutes, hear his most pressing questions and offer solutions and be able to use AI to take notes, to give him immediate points of action on what we could do. It's I think that that's more of what people are looking for when it comes to growing, because we're in this weird point of time where there's more information than ever, but it's also more overwhelming than ever. If you look at the expectations for a normal person, especially here in Missoula, the cost of living is pretty crazy. To be able to own a home, to have a good life, you need to make some real money. It's not a joke anymore. You have to make $120,000 to $150,000 if you want to own a home out here, minimum. And so I think a lot of people see this idea, and it's kind of like the idea with eMeth, is that they're good at the technical side of their job. And they're like, man, I'm a good whatever. I know how to do this. I'll go in and start working for myself. And then they've never had anyone talk about kind of what you're going through is okay, but now we have to make sure that you have the right people in the right spots, or that you understand how to handle all these tasks. Because you're right. There are times when you're newer, it's I'm going to have to wear different hats. I don't do this very well. So how can I figure out how to do this better and ultimately get the right person in the right seat? But I think that's, with Biz, is what's really exciting to me as well, is that I see us heading in this direction where we are going to, as an organization, I think the community is it's starting to build. I don't know, maybe it's just here in Missoula, I feel it.
No, it's all over.
Yeah, and when you say it's starting to build, what does it look like for a new small business owner that wants to be involved, or how do they even hear about you guys? Because as far as I know, it's pretty referral based. But yeah,
I'll let you fill it. Go for it.
Yeah. We have not done historically any marketing except for word of mouth, honestly. And we're going to start. But oftentimes it does come from an invite from another member who comes and visits a group and decides that they feel like it's a good fit for their business. And then they're offered an application to join.
Yeah. And is there any sort of requirement?
There isn't. We're non-discriminatory. So there are because there are a lot of organizations like Biz kind of.
Yeah, you were mentioning the one that was very expensive, and
there's all walks. There's everything from there's free things. There's Biz. There's things where you spend an arm and a leg. I think Biz hits a sweet spot, and I'll go into why in just a sec, but I'll let you keep answering.
So anyway, there's I don't remember your question.
Is there any limitations for some?
Yeah.
No, so we're a non-discriminatory organization. That actually goes back to when the founder created Biz to Biz. In Minnesota, there's way more networking opportunities than here in Montana. And she went to one and hadn't experienced it before and was kind of blown away. And that particular organization had a membership committee that had to decide whether you could join or not. Yeah. And she didn't like that. She thought everybody should have an opportunity to grow their business if they wanted to and prove themselves worthy or not, right? And so we have other things in place for that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've seen with Biz that is making it work so well, especially as the community is growing, is that we're leaning much more into the business development side. Exactly. And as the president of the group that I'm in, our little, our group, I said the president, so regal. Excuse me, president coming through, But what I've seen is that I try and make it a priority that anyone who comes to visit, I will meet with them one-on-one. I want to talk to them. I want to see where they're at. And I want to just kind of see give them the no BS. This is what's great about what we're doing. This is what we see it as, and this is where we're going. If you want to come with us, great. But this is what we're doing. And so if this is not a good fit for you, that's awesome. God bless America. But what I've noticed in talking to people who are coming in is that people who are small business owners, and I've said this before, is that everyone assumes they have it all figured out. They know what they're doing. And it's people don't. People are normal people with normal flaws and normal concerns. And, the data is also super clear. And this kind of crosses over into our industry, is that there is so much data. I was just reading through a study right now that says that anywhere from between 50 to as many as 65% of employees, so people working at any standard job, have at least a moderate level of financial stress. And when you start looking at the impacts that this has on their relationships, on their life, and I'm summarizing, but there's studies that go through all this stuff in detail. And these aren't like small, like, oh, this is a 1,000-person survey where we handpicked the people to get. No, these are studies that are crossing tens of thousands of people. And it just shows that people like are stressed, and I don't think it matters if they're in their job or if they're self-employed, but they need help and they need guidance. And I think that's what biz is really starting to do. And the other thing is that I kind of overlooked, because I've been working for myself for so long, is the environment it creates of positivity. So we had Phil, who just recently came to visit, and I've known Phil for a long time. Awesome dude, but new business owner, getting things up and running, but been doing his line of work forever, but he's new to being it as the business owner. Right. And one of the things he said, because I think he ended up joining the Wednesday group, or I don't know.
Going to join the
in like 2 weeks from now. Yeah. He went to all the groups, and it was just scheduling. And that was the thing, is because we have hard, like, hey, you need to be here at this time. This is the time we meet. Don't miss it. Yeah. And he was like, I can't make it to this one. I'm going to go to this one. Great. That's awesome. But he said, man, I just couldn't believe how positive everyone was at every group. And he's like, this, for me, coming from a corporate environment, was so big, because he's like, Robert, I kept feeling like, when are you guys going to ask for my firstborn? Because I couldn't believe you guys were so positive. And that's another thing that I've noticed, like when it's running right, like to have a group of people that are like your friends, but that have your best interests at heart, I think is really, really impactful, and like gives people a solid, safe space to like feel like they don't have to have all the answers. And I think you've been doing a really good job of like cultivating that with our group. And I'm sure it's kind of at the other groups as well. But that's something that like excites me about where biz could be and what it could look like. Like in my perfect world, I see something like biz. I kind of had the idea of like, after talking to my buddy about the way his networking group worked, I was like, I could build that. I could build something like that. And I was like, well, I already have this format, so let's just use what biz is doing. But to me, I think that it will grow to a point where it's like, because it's exclusive and that only one person per industry could be in a group, I think it's going to get to the point where it's like people will be fighting, like people will be standing in line to get into a biz group, because they'll know that like this is going to help me grow and it's going to help me develop. And I think for people who maybe are a little bit further along in their career, it gives them the awesome opportunity. Like I'm thinking of Sarah in our group, where it's like, here she is like busting out all these sales skills. I was like, I didn't even know she knew all this crap, you know, but like, it's like, it gives people the chance to like teach. And that's something I've seen over and over in my life, whether it's in the Army, even doing jujitsu. Like what's helped me the most and everything that I want to be good at is teaching other people. And so like it forces you to think through everything and to define it and like really come up with like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's impacted you a lot with every time I come back. It's like, oh, I wish we had this. You're like, I actually created something. This is how it works. And it's like, oh, this is why she's good at this stuff. You know, that's why she could walk into a room and be like, this group needs this. I see what's happening here, you know? So I wanted to dig into like, you've talked a lot about earlier with your kids, and I know we've kind of bouncing around, but like, what does that look like in your ideal world? Like when you're thinking about, you know, Tami of the future and what you want your life to look like, and how you're like, what does that look like to like building the ideal life for you and for your family? Because I feel like everything you've talked about has come back to like, you made choices based on where you saw your family was at. You made choices as a young woman about like, I don't want to repeat this. You know, when I asked you about like the things that have influenced you the most, it wasn't necessarily one thing as much as like how you wanted to create your life and what it looks like. Like, what does that look like to you? Like, perfect world, like everything works out the way you want it to. How do you see your future?
Yeah, it kind of pretty closely is. Because of the work environment with biz, like my time is so flexible. So if my kids need something, even though most of them are adults now, I'm able to be there for them, which is great and all I ever have wanted. I get to be the core of biz and the core of my family and navigating everything with them and helping them and coaching them, and because that's what it shifts into when they're older. Not so much parenting as mentoring and coaching, which is really great. I think the only other thing that my dream is to be able to build my business up more so that I have a higher income, so that, because my husband's 10 years older than I am, and he would love to have a house in Arizona and play golf all day, you know? So I just want to help him create that and have that flexibility, do everything from my computer. As
you're doing that too, as you're developing your business, like tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, we've kind of bounced around that, but let's talk about what you're doing for business owners and how you're helping them.
So far, it's been as varied as my experience with biz chapters, to be honest with you, but it comes down to the same core things on this personality stuff. So my goal is really to work with small businesses to up level by strategically placing people in the right positions and just doing some stuff courageously within their businesses, whether it's having a SWOT analysis with a sales team to be like, what's working, what's not, how do we come together as a team, even if it is commission based? Are people in the right roles? How can we make it so the business owner can put the people in the right roles? Because all of that is going to help small businesses grow just as much as biz does in a lot of ways. So,
and do you see, like, one thing for me in my industry is we are taking the role of a consultant. We are taking the role of someone as an outsider looking in and making recommendations that are going to impact people's lives in the biggest way. Like, it makes me smile when I hear people, my wife's a realtor, and so they'll be like, oh, your house is the biggest purchase you're ever going to make. Maybe, but it's definitely not the most important decision you're ever going to make. To me, it's getting your investments correct matters more than that, because this is like, well, what does my life really look like? And so it's something that I've taken extremely serious over the years, because I know that people are betting their life savings on the recommendations I'm giving them. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the same for you, because, even with me, my business is worth way more than any savings I'll ever have at this point. And it's always going to be, because ultimately, like, I'm building a business that I can sell down the road. That's the goal for me. Not anytime soon. Don't worry, clients. I'm here for a while. But eventually, like, no one lasts forever. And I want to get to the point where by the time I'm 60, I want to sell my business at 60 with a 5-year phase out plan, so that I can be here. I can make sure whoever buys it, Josie, it takes it over and is doing great. But people, are betting everything on the recommendations I'm giving them. But why I'm saying all that is because, like, for you, the business, for so many people you're talking to, it's going to be similar. We're like, yeah, they'll have savings, they'll do all that stuff. But ultimately, the goal is like building something that hopefully they can sell. And that's probably going to be a huge part of the retirement. I was just looking at a case study with one of our providers. Is a guy who sold his business and he netted 50 mil, Well, he didn't net, he sold it for 50, and then there's taxes, and that's a whole other strategy. But, like, how do you look at that, and what, how do you have the confidence for yourself that when you're talking to people and you're making recommendations that might be big type of changes for these businesses, that you're like, I got this, I know this is going to help them? Like, where do you find that confidence?
All my work with biz, honestly, because you have to figure over the past 11 years, I've worked with hundreds of small businesses, more, probably closer to thousands of small businesses, small business leaders from all different industries. Plus what I've built within biz as far as our systems, building out our CRM system, building out our automations, our workflows, our marketing. I do our social media marketing. So I've been so multifaceted for so long that I know the lane that I'm going to stay in, but I can also see, like, other aspects of where shoring them up would be valuable. And then because of all my connections, I have good referral sources too, right? So I would say that's where it comes from the most.
What do you, because I'm thinking about our process. As I sit down with someone, there's kind of a step-by-step. It's almost like in the Army, they would teach us, everyone's a first responder. You might be the person who gets to your buddy after you're getting shot, blown up, whatever. So you need to know at least, hey, what can I do to keep this person alive? And there's a step-by-step process, and it's like a triage process. So when I'm walking in and I'm talking to people in any walk of life, there's certain things I look for first. It's like, okay, we need to make sure this is done. We need to make sure this. And it's kind of a sequential step-by-step process. Do you see, when you're talking to businesses, it's something similar where there's, yes, every business is its own individual thing, but there's also things that, like, we got to make sure we're doing this. And this is kind of the step-by-step process that I would follow for most people when I'm talking. Or maybe if that's not the case, like, if there's someone out there who is a smaller business and maybe in their first couple of years and they're like trying to keep things going, get things up and running, like, what are the big things that you're like, these are the things I see typically move the needle and that I think small businesses should be focused on?
Right. It's going to sound redundant, but if you keep having sticky points in your business and you have any kind of staff, you need to do personality assessments. I just can't say it enough. So one of the case studies that I'm working on.
Is it just specifically for rapport? Is that what you're kind of leaning towards? So how is that impactful?
So how it's impactful, if you have somebody who's supposed to be in a managerial role that is supposed to be somehow details focused, and they struggle with details, and the owner's like, but you said you were gonna blah, 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 right? And you just keep having that same conversation, and you try coaching them, and you try putting in place the system, and you try all these things. Maybe you try 5 years worth of things, and you still are just like banging your head against the wall. It's probably a personality issue, whether it's how the two interact.
But you don't think people can change that? That to me is the interesting part, because I'm like, I think that people change so much.
You're just screwed, Josie. You'll never change. It's kind of suck for you.
Details.
Well, what do you mean by change? How about that?
So it's like you have the same conversation with people over and over of, okay, you need to be organized with this. You need to be like on time with this stuff. And then they continuously not do it. Is it a personality thing or is it a work ethic thing? You know what I'm saying? To where it's like, yeah, they might not be good at it, but they just have to learn, you know?
I think that's a great question. Tell me about your experiences around that.
I don't know.
I know what you're asking, and I know how I would answer this question, because for me, what you're asking about is why I think systems are so important. Yeah. Because systems are going to basically show what should happen. This is how it should work. So take a franchise that we all know, McDonald's. McDonald's has very clear systems. So anybody can walk in and say, this is the way it works. And a great book on this is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. He is this is one of the best books on this subject, because he says that every small business owner, regardless of where you're at, should treat their business as a small franchise, but not as a small franchise, but as a franchise that ultimately you could scale and sell. Yeah. And so and there's another book that's called The Ultimate Sales Machine, where he says, imagine if today you were going to have to hire 50 people to do your job, and then next week you had to hire another 50. And the next week you had to hire another 50. Do you have a system in place where you could show them, this is the way, this is step by step the process? And I think that the processes are what are going to bring out how it should work. And then that married with these personality assessments are going to help you identify who the right people are for this role. And for smaller businesses, because there's a lot of people out there is like, well, that's great, but I have no budget. I am a one-person army. Yeah. I think for those people,
or even because I know there's a lot of people in there that are not people focused at all, very, very much introverts. But for a lot of business, you just have to start talking to people. And so I think that can't those be learned skills?
So some of them are learned skills, but I think Robert gave a really great example early on when he said he's the in-person person or the front-facing person versus Grayson, who's the back end. Exactly. Right? Grayson can be up front facing. Yes. Like I've seen him at biz meetings. He's well-spoken. He's eloquent. But he doesn't thrive there. And so if we're talking about creating a life where we're thriving or a business where we're thriving, I think taking the balance of learned skills, but making sure people are someplace where they're like excited to be is going to have the greatest impact.
Yeah. And for me, a lesson I learned, actually, I learned this with my wife. This was before we were married, but we were moving over her investment accounts. And this was back when I wasn't doing a great job of keeping things organized, because that is not my skill set. I am not you've seen it. It's like just getting Robert to respond to an email, clients, I'm sorry. I honestly look at emails maybe every 2 to 3 days. Their advisor friends of mine are like, how do you do that? And I peruse. So if there's something important, I catch it. I'm like, I'm going to get to that in like 2 days from now. So I realized what I was lacking on, and I came up with systems for myself that would force me to get things done the right way, but I was never happy. Like, let's use this as an example. Up until recently, I've been the one editing all these videos. Yeah. I've learned how to do it. I know how to do it. I hate doing it because it's just like frustrating to me because it's not where I thrive. And so, again, it's something that for a time I had to do. I just didn't have the budget, to make it work the other way. But then it's like, okay, all the stuff we've been doing has been bringing in a ton of business. And so now it's like, all right, instead of taking this money and be like, haha, I'm making more money. It's like, no, I'm going to reinvest this. I'm going to hire another I'm going to hire someone who handles all the video editing so that we can consistently do this. But that is like, I built a system. I know how it works. Now I could see what it should look like. But then I can also very quickly identify this is not my strong point. And I think that's what a lot of your training that we've been going through is like, I have built everything from the ground up with Nexus of how it should be done. There's things I've taken from a lot of people that I learned, but it's like the reason I'm great at every aspect of the business is because I've done every aspect of the business. Now, I don't think that has to be the way it goes moving forward, is that you should eventually get to the point where like not everyone has to be an expert at everything. Like Stephanie, when on our last podcast, she said something. It was like, if you can get someone to do a job that you do like 80 to 90%. Yep. Yeah. You knew what I was going to say. Is that something?
It's in a book.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So she said, if you can get someone to do a job as well as you at 80%, let them do that job. Go do something else. And that is kind of like where Nexus is at right now. Like you're at like 30% of how good I can do things, so.
That makes sense. I've been doing it less than a third of the time.
Yeah, it's just still out there where the jury's out. But in all seriousness, like I think going back to your question, that is something that for a smaller business owner, I would say like build systems, document everything. Yeah. And then I really think, and I want to dive into these personality assessments because the only ones I've ever done are the little ones we've done at Biz. Yeah. But it sounds like this is a pretty like deep dive that you do. Like what does that look like? So if someone does a personality assessment with you, how detailed is it? And you said there's like 40 something personalities you can identify. Like how many questions? Like what does that even look like?
Yeah. It's actually still only like a 7-minute assessment. Mm-hmm. The value is the different information it pulls. So I can do one that's like sales leader specific, sales specific, growth specific, just a general one. I even have one that's around hiring. So when we're talking about finding the right seats, right butts for the right seats, like we can get really clear on that too. But they are really in depth. They're like 34 pages long.
Wow. Yeah, because for me, that is always something where I just, again, go ahead. You have some?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I do. I feel like sometimes I look at those, and again, my personality, I kind of do what you do. Like that's like the same thing. My wife, I hope she never watches these. I don't care if she does. I'm just joking. Love you, sweetie. But there's sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, this and this, that. But she does the astrological, like not really deep into it, but she'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a whatever, and this is why I'm like, that is dumb. Like, no way the stars are defining Robert Montez. Like, no one controls Robert but Robert. And, like, even with my son, I'm like, you control your thoughts. You control your habits. You control your emotions. So it is sometimes hard for me to be like, I'm probably never going to be great at that, But having been doing this for as long as I have, there are some things I'm like, I am never going to be great at responding to emails in a timely fashion. I just not. That's why I forward everything to Grayson, and he takes care of it. And then I'm like, oh, there we go. And so, like, I think with some of these personality assessments, like, it sounds like the deeper you go into them, the more almost data and ammunition you have to, like, really define who should be doing what. Is that right?
So I'll use myself as an example. I shared with you earlier that I am actually a really high C and then equal DS, right? And that has changed, but with a lot of work, because my original kind of assessments were that I was equally a D and a C. Now, how that would show up, it probably was painful to watch me in front of people within biz chapters, because I would speak in bullet points. Mm-hmm. I would also email in bullet points. I would tend to be, because D's and C's tend to be more like professional and like classically dressed and just a little more stoic, right? So I was that to kind of an extreme, until somebody was like, you really should probably soften up and stop wearing black to meetings all the time, right? And so I just got a lot of feedback. And again, deciding who I wanted to be, I was able to soften some of that up. But a lot of it came from real clear awareness about who I am innately and how I want to show up. Mm. And so if I'm speaking to somebody who I can tell is probably a high I and S, I dial my C and D back a lot, because I don't want to come across as aggressive or too assertive or too hard or cold or non-feeling. So if somebody starts off with small chat and talking about all the things they're up to, I immediately kind of lighten myself up. I'm like, oh, that's so great. Tell me more about it, and I'm just able to navigate that, which is a learned skill.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's both.
What about as far as like, you said one other thing that I did want to go back. I made a little a note for this, but you were talking about the historical roles that you've been seeing in biz and kind of redefining that. How are you doing that within the organization? And just like, it takes it's hard. Using our group as an example, okay? Like I said earlier, we were dying about a year ago, and then you started coming around, and what was funny, it was almost like we had to take another step backwards to take more steps forward.
Absolutely.
Because you showed up and you're like, hey guys, this is kind of effed up. Like, it's not working well. Like, we're not following the systems. And I was excited. Like, when you started showing up, I was like, this is going to be great. It's going to help. Thank God. Like, oh, we need some help. And that was my immediate thought. But then I think we had like 3 or 4 people like, bye, Felicia. Like, I'm out. Like, they were gone. It's like, Tammy's here.
Too direct.
Yeah. And then like, so we went down, like I said, because we were probably at about 10 members.
I think you guys were still at like 15 when I started coming, but we pretty quickly dropped to like 7.
7, yeah. It was low. And like, that was what was weird for me to see, because we all know these things like, oh, change is hard and blah, blah, blah. But like, you're right. Yeah. We still had people showing up, but like, and then it was just like a ghost town. It was like, oh crap, this is like, that was like a flickering candle, you know? So when you're doing that at the organizational level, do you feel like it's, I mean, I'm kind of putting it on the spot. I feel like it's being well received at Biz, and like the team is like, how are you approaching that?
So I feel like Biz is in the best place it's ever been. And there was a point in time with Biz where we had more like 1,200 members and 90 chapters over 5 states. And between COVID and ownership changes are dramatically different. We're at 40 chapters and 560 members over 5 states. But it's the best it's ever been because of the changes. And I think that change is hard, and people relate to energy. And so when he talks about the chapter dying, they were actually still following the agenda. It's just there wasn't any life behind it. There wasn't an intention or a vision. So it really starts with bringing the team together. And I think that was one of our first meetings when we really got down in numbers. It was, what do you guys want to create? And that's been my conversation these last 6 months, especially with every single chapter. If you have a blank piece of paper in front of you, and I tell you that you do not have to recreate anything because it's all already made, what would you want to create? What would you want this to look like? And that has been the basis of every conversation. And so shifting those leadership roles has looked similar. And I think you and I are a great play on this because you're an amazing president. I knew that you should be president of that chapter 4 years ago, I think, or I guess it would be 3. Todd and I were talking about some things, and I was in a meeting and kind of met you for the first time. I was like, Robert needs to be the president. And Todd was like, he's not going to be. I was like, well, we'll see.
One day we'll get him.
We'll see. But it is finding that balance, right? Because you can, as soon as you saw what it could be, you had that vision, right? And so that is the president role. When we're looking at strengths-based leadership, task-based leadership, having somebody leading the meetings who can create a vision and then putting in support people around that is important. And it looks different for everybody. Because technically the chairperson should follow up with guests, but you like to do that. And so you do that, right? And I think that's where, rather than just saying, no, Robert, the chairperson's supposed to be doing that, I'm saying, I don't care who's doing what. I just want it done. Yeah. Like, whoever loves that and wants to do it, please do it.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask you, and again, some of these questions are just putting you on the spot and like, oh, think of an answer. But like, we've been talking about leadership this whole time. What do you think makes a good leader?
I think that is a very broad question that I'm going to think about for 2 seconds.
Yeah. Again, I mean, this is, of course, she's on the spot. So like, this was not planned, but like, I mean, I'm just curious because like, I wonder what do you think are like, what makes a good leader?
I think that leadership is not positional. I think that leadership is a mindset about wanting to look around you and make shifts to make other people better, whether that's giving a hand up in some capacity or mentorship. But I guess I feel like leadership and being a leader is more of an attitude than necessarily a specific role.
And when you're talking about like attitudes, and I'll use examples from my life as well, is that I think of in the Army, there would be leaders, quote unquote, where I remember I had a squad leader, Staff Sergeant Sanchez, and I was never happier than when he was my squad leader. Because the very first thing, so I got moved. I was on a different squad, and then I got moved to a new company, new squad. And that happens. It wasn't anything bad, but I just, he pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey man, you've been here at Battalion for about a year and a half." He's like, and I hadn't gone to Ranger school yet. So I was a non-tab spec 4, which is like, that basically means you're still a private, but it's like, hey, you've been here for a while, you know, all that stuff. He's like, "Look, man, you're a Ranger." He's like, "You know what you're doing. If you see something that's effed up and I'm messing up, come grab me, pull me aside, tell me what I did that was wrong, and I'll respect you for it. You call me out in front of anyone, or you try and like, you know, belittle me, we're going to have issues." He's like, "I'm the leader of this team, but you're still a Ranger. So if you see something, you say something." I was like, "Roger that." And then, but that was big boy rules, and everyone was free to do what they wanted to do. And like in battalion, they would be like, "That's the God squad." Like we were the squad, like everything was dialed in. But then he actually stood up one day to a first sergeant who was making a mistake. And basically, long story short, this is a weird story. But we had, so I don't know, but anyway, this happened. This is a real life story. We had two guys, I'm not going to say their names, I'll protect the innocent there, but they were at a barbecue, and one of them was showing his new concealed carry setup. Now, they had been drinking, and he was drawing his gun and showing, and he had an Indy, a negligent discharge, where he shot his buddy right in his arm. And thankfully, this guy, if he's listening, there's the Rangers, they all know this story from when I was there. It was like, but this guy had horrible ammo. He had ball ammo, so it just went through and through. But he was inches away where he would have hit him in the heart. It would have killed him. And so we all got recalled at like a Saturday, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. It's probably like we're showing up into work at like 2 a.m. And I mean, it's a bunch of Rangers. Like everyone's pretty much drunk. Like it's a weekend, you know, we're just all partying and living it up. And so all of us get back to formation. And then our first sergeant at the time, again, I won't say his name either, really squared away dude, exact guy you want to go to war with, but like he made a mistake, and he was pulled out from the arms room a Beretta, and there's a pistol, and there's an M9. He's like making guys go through the process of clearing the weapon, and he made us do this for like an hour and a half. And again, this is like 2 a.m. on Sunday, and people are drunk, like they're still drunk. And he starts talking. He goes, "Oh, I know some of you guys think I'm an idiot right now. Who here thinks I'm being an idiot?" And my squad leader out of a company size element, so this is like 200 Rangers, looks around and he goes, one hand up, throws it up. And this guy goes, "At least you have the fucking balls to say something." He's like, "I'll deal with you this on Monday." And he's like, my squad leader is like, "Yeah, there's no reason any of these guys should be handling weapons right now. Most of these guys are drunk. This is a horrible idea." Yeah. And he got fired for doing that from his position. And he ended up going a different place, had a lot of success, awesome squad leader. But they ended up bringing another guy that just was much more of like a yes man. And like, "Oh yeah, we'll do that. And then just my life went to hell. And I was like, I hate my job now. And so it was all had to do, like leadership was everything. And I think of Art Williams, who built up one of the biggest insurance companies from scratch, and he would talk over and over about how leadership was everything to an organization. And so just kind of going back, that was just a story for me, like things that were interesting that kind of, I was like, man, it really does make a difference. Like, are there any, like you said a couple of things about how biz is at the best it's ever been, but I want to know, like, what do you see? Like, are there success stories from leaders you've seen that have been like, this is somebody who's doing it right? Or like, you talked earlier too about like seeing people when you were going to some of those trainings, like that were further ahead. Like, was there any one, like, I kind of want to go back to I forget the name of the person you're talking about from the Maxwell stuff, but you're like, this person, like, what were those interactions that I guess I'm not trying to get to, is like, what was it about the interactions you had with that person on an ongoing basis that you're like, this is what good leadership is. This is how he's influencing the rooms. This is how he's changing like the lives of the people he's interacting with. Was there anything about that, or the way that that person was like guiding you guys, that really helped you form like your thoughts on leadership and kind of your approach to what you're doing when you're trying to help people develop that?
I am going to tell you a story. So when my first husband died, for a lot of reasons, I didn't feel like I was responsible because I made that choice for him, or because I pushed him to that choice. But I did have a pretty high level of responsibility that I wasn't really able or willing to admit I had. And because of that, I went through a really long period of time where I was just in a space of punishing myself. And a lot of that looked like being with the very wrong person for me for 10 years. And my kids and I just going through a lot. And I was listening to one of his calls, and he would like to do big deep dives into Think and Grow Rich annually. And I hadn't really listened to them, but I started to. And there was one where, I don't remember what chapter it is, but I think the title is Imagination, and kind of what you picture and envision all the time is what you end up creating in your life, right? This is the first time I'm saying this publicly, but it matters. Things were so bad between me and my first husband, because you have to figure we were young. We had 3 boys by that time. So we were 24, had 3 boys. He had been in and out of work for a variety of reasons. We were living with his mom at the time. There was just a lot of hard stuff. Our first son was really sick, so we spent a lot of time in the hospital with him, part of it being in Seattle, like just a lot of hard stuff to be 24 and going through, right? And some pretty significant stuff happened. And because I only ever wanted to be with one person, I thought every night I would just think, if he just died, right? Like if something happened where I didn't have to really look at what the situation was and file divorce or whatever, like that just seems easiest. And so as you're listening to Think and Grow Rich and that chapter, I was like, I totally created this. And I realized that I've been blaming myself and punishing myself for all of these years because I feel like I created this. So I actually signed up to go to an in-person training that Paul was putting on in Georgia a month later, after I had that realization what I'd been doing. And I'd had enough interaction with him that he knew me when I came. And we were going through this training, and I went to Paul and I was like, I have to ask you this question. And it was him and one of the other faculty members, Roddy. And I said, this is what happened. And he was like, oh my gosh, right? And so I think the thing that was most impactful for me about those 2 people is that they were trauma informed as much as they were interested and believed in personal development, because our generation in particular has been through so much trauma for a variety of reasons. Latchkey kids, right? Boomer parents, all the things. I think we have to be trauma informed to be good leaders too.
I also think that your generation has a hard time with things like therapy, and I feel like my generation is pretty good with that and like mental health, and I think with your guys' generation it's something that gets overlooked a lot of the times.
Yeah, stigma.
Yeah.
No, that's that had to be really, what did that feel like to get that validation of like, I don't know, maybe validation is the wrong word, but to like have someone hear you and hear what you were thinking and not let you know it's okay, but like to let you know like, no, this is not, you didn't do this, you know, because it sounds like you were carrying that around. And
for a long time.
How many years was this?
By that time, it was over 10 years.
Wow.
It was
this,
had to have been 10 years because my relationship with that person ended shortly after I came back.
Was this on your day-to-day, like how much did that thought process impact how you felt? Like, because I can only imagine like finding out your husband had committed suicide and knowing that those had been thoughts that you had and like the guilt that must have been there. And then you think about like, you know, your kids and all that, like looking back on that, do you feel like that was having a huge impact on the way you were approaching things, maybe without even realizing it? Or
Absolutely, because by that time, even at 24, I was really good about the words I used, right? So when I was in counseling and they were like, oh, you must blame yourself a lot, I would say, no, I feel responsible for the actions I took leading up to it, but I don't feel responsible for his choice, which is really just kind of splitting hairs, you know what I mean? And so to be honest, I didn't really let myself really look at that until it had to have been my earlier 30s, 31, 32, where I was just like, what is going on? Because I was so careful about what I let myself think about. I think how it showed up, though, was I could never let an argument go. You know, where some people maybe need some space to like calm down. I couldn't let that go because what if something happened? Mm-hmm. You know, so it showed up in a lot of weird ways.
What, I mean, and again, we kind of talked about this earlier on, that people, you know, dealing with situations that are just difficult. And obviously the goal of this podcast isn't just to be like, oh, let's make a ton of money, but it's really, let's live fuller, better lives, you know? Do you, looking back, I don't know how to ask this the right way, so if it comes off as insensitive, I apologize. Do you feel like there's things that could have changed that would have prevented your first husband from taking his own life, or things that could have been done that now maybe you're like, man, knowing what I know, even if it meant like we still weren't together and it sounds like you weren't happy with the relationship, but like maybe there's like, hey, this was a sign and I should have asked for help here, or he could have gotten like, because I think of my friend Ryan, my buddy Ryan from Battalion, he got into a dark spot and he unintentionally killed himself. And the last post he ever made on Facebook was basically a picture of Jack Daniels, a picture of a revolver, and said, who wants to play some Russian roulette? And he ended up shooting himself in the head. And I found out because I'll never forget, it was on December 15th. It was my daughter's birthday that he killed himself. And Ryan was the very first person I ever met when I showed up to Battalion. He picked me up from in processing and drove me over because there's a complex, there's a separate compound for the Ranger Regiment that you have to have, you know, clearance to get into. And so he brought me there because I didn't have clearance. And he was just a dick to me. He was such an asshole because he had just gotten his Ranger tab, and, you know, like he was a Spec 4, which is like, you know, like it's a leader position. And I did not like him. But we somehow became friends. I don't even know how. And we would hang out. We'd go out on the weekends all the time. We'd like, you know, I remember because he was starting to do so well, but he got caught up in something that wasn't really his fault. And this kind of goes back to like, sorry, I asked you a question, but now I'm telling a story. But I asked you a question about like, you know, what could be different. And in the Ranger Regiment, I was coming up, it was right in that in-between spot where counseling was becoming more the norm. And they were trying to get people past, because for a long time in the Ranger Regiment, if you went and said, I need help, you would lose your job because you were done. You were done. They would move you to the S shop, which is like basically like you're helping with paperwork, but you're no longer fighting the fight. And this is a weird thing in the regiment, is that like it messes with you seeing all this stuff. Like you get like people get killed, like not like, thankfully not a lot of Rangers get killed because of the way we're executing missions. It's not nearly as high as the big Army. But you're watching people get killed over and over and over. And so it does start to mess with you, and people don't want to say that they need help. And so, but I just remember Ryan, he was doing really well, and he had started seeing this girl. Like I remember going out with him. I don't remember the girl's name, but he basically was kind of a goober. And like, but somehow we went out one night and he pulled a girl that was like a really like just a pretty girl, super nice, super normal, super just everything. And things were going well, but then something happened where he got caught up being accused of hazing. And he didn't do anything different than everyone else in Battalion had been doing, but it was in that in-between spot where like the Army was kind of getting a little woke. And so they made an example out of him and out of a couple other guys, and he went to a dark spot because they forced this guy who joined the Army, joined the Ranger Regiment, to go out and to hunt down terrorists. And then because he did the same thing everyone else was doing with treating privates the way he was, like he wasn't like doing anything like different. It's just like he got made an example of, and it put him in this spot. And I always think about that as like a lack of leadership and a lack of being able to identify that like this is a good Ranger. This is a guy who like worked hard, who lives this life, who wants nothing more than to do a good job and be on the team. And you took all that away from him, and it sent him, you put him in the arms room, which again, they're not taking away from people who work in the arms room, but unless you want to be there, like usually people who go to the arms room is because they're getting out. So you're not training, you're not in the training cycle. You got a few months, you know. But they put him there, and they like, so he could see everything every day, but he didn't get to do it. Yeah. And it like led to this spiral, and he kind of lost everything. He went down this dark path. And looking back, I wish I would have talked to him more about stuff, because I saw him getting really dark and really just saying things that was like, oh man, red flags. And it's like, oh, that'll be fine. And then it really messed with me too, because like after Ryan died, I remember, like, I'm really ashamed to say this. I remember being like, fucking idiot. Like, I was like, why the fuck would he do that? Like, why would you do this? Like, what an idiot. And I was so like just blasé about it, because I was like, well, people die all the time. And like, you're just seeing this stuff and you're like, oh, he died. And I was just like, and it hurt me so much. I was like, you idiot. Like, I was just so angry at him. I was like, why did you do this? But I just kind of was like, I'm not going to say anything about this. And I remember like going back and doing, they would make us do these like surveys after deployments. And I remember when I was deployed, I think in 2015, I was in Afghanistan, and they make you do like a post-deployment analysis where you have to talk to a doctor and all that. And they're like, oh, blah, blah. And I was just talking to him, and he was like, hey man, when you get back stateside, I want you to talk to someone. You need to talk to somebody. And I was like, oh yeah, roger that, sir. Because, an officer, blah, blah, roger that, sir, whatever. And just move out, whatever. And then I get back, and I was talking to the nurse practitioner and the therapist when I got stateside. And she's like, you need to talk to someone. You really are saying things that are not like good. And I did this questionnaire, and it's like however many points you could score. I think it was out of like 350. If you got anything over a 300, it's like crisis mode. Everything's going to shit. Like, you need help. And my score was over 300. And I just remember like, no, this is fine. And then like, but then hearing it from multiple people, it's like, I had enough like recognition to be like, okay, I need to go talk to someone, because if 2 different people are saying this, it's probably true. And I'm so glad I did. But like, I wish that I would have done more with Ryan. I wish I would have talked to him more. And I wish that I don't know, I take it very serious now when I hear people say, whether they're threatening me, I take threats to me very serious, but I also, when people make self-harm threats, And so looking back with your husband, do you see things that you're like, knowing what I know now, I would have changed this, or I would have done something different? Is there anything like that?
I think his was a little bit of a unique situation, and this actually ties back to grief and some of what you're talking about, because one of the most significant impacts for him, we'd been best friends actually since 9th grade. His dad passed away between the summer of his 7th and 8th grade year, and his mom, she just kind of checked out of life at that point. So she was sleeping a lot and just not really present. And he was really close to his aunt and uncle. And I think it was the summer between our 9th and 10th grade year that his uncle died.
What was your husband's name?
Mike. Yeah, so Mike's uncle died. So you figure 2 of the most significant relationships in his life passed away. His mom was incapable of dealing with the grief. And so he literally went through all of high school without the emotional tools to deal with it. And then he moved in with me. It was right after he turned 18, because our birthdays were just a couple of days apart. So January of our senior year, he moved in with me, and we moved out in August to our own place, and we were pregnant almost right away. So here we're 18, I'm going to school, he's working, I'm working. We have Jake. Jake's really sick. So it just started this spiral, because Jake was so sick that because his medical bills were what they were, the company was a national organization, but somebody from the national organization came and said, hey, we're doing layoffs. And Mike was a really well-respected member of the team. And they were like, you need to lay off this guy. And the manager was like, he's our best guy. What are you talking about? And they're like, you're laying him off, or it's your job. And so we experienced the job loss, and then we hadn't gotten married yet. So we were supposed to get married. He started a new job. Like, it just was such a compression of so many life events all at once without the emotional tools. He did go to the doctor, and at that time, it was all the rage to diagnose people with being bipolar 2. And so he was put on medication that was probably not appropriate for the situation. So we were dealing with hallucinations and being young and not knowing, it was such a compression of so many traumatic events at once that I can't tell you that there's a moment that anything would have changed. I think he was over capacity.
And he was, how old was he when he died?
We were 24.
And you guys had how many kids at that time?
3.
And how old were they?
So Jacob was 4, just turning 5. Peyton was 3.5, and Dylan was 1.5. So 2.5, 1.5, sorry.
And then with your kids, I mean, it's not obviously just someone losing a spouse, but kids losing a parent. I mean, did the kids remember him at all, or?
Dylan, not so much, but he was the most impacted, which is kind of interesting. And for us, our saving grace was Tamarack Grief Resource Center, because I'd seen a write-up in the paper about a camp to remember. And so Jacob went that year twice. The age cutoff was actually 8. But I told the executive director this situation. She was like, does he like people? And I said, yep. And she goes, he should come to camp. So the kids grew up in camp.
Yeah, that's it's something. I mean, that's another thing that I hope people know, and I am glad to see that it's much more. People are open to talking, because I've seen people that I love and respect so much. Like one of my heroes in life, if he ever hears this, I've told him this before, but it was one of my first squad leaders. When I was going through the selection process, you have a squad leader that's assigned to you, and it's a guy named Jason Belford, and he retired as a first sergeant from 3rd Ranger Battalion. And it's funny because I have another buddy, I'm not going to say his name, he's like, Jason's a dick, I hate that dude, and he just never liked him. He's like, oh, he's a tool. I could see that, because Jason, what I always liked about him was that he was the guy that was the case study of basically like, you can accomplish anything if you're willing to work hard enough. He grew up in I believe the mountains of Appalachia. No, he's from Alabama, I think it's something like that. So he's self-described, like, I grew up trailer trash, poor, like nothing, could barely read. And when he tells a story, and he's pretty active on social media, so there's a lot of podcasts where he's talking phenomenal stories. But he talks about how he kind of lost everything. He pretty much had to retire from Ranger Regiment because of the pacing. This was a guy where I met him as a squad leader. He was an E6. I think at that time he had over 10 deployments. And I remember asking him, just as, again, a guy not even a Ranger yet, but I was like, Sergeant Belford, like, what's a lot of kills? Like, what's that? And he goes, and he pulls up his shirt, and he's got hash marks on his ribs. He's like, well, my 22 was pretty good, And I'm like, because he was a sniper, and I was like, holy shit. Like, I remember we would do runs where we would go, and we would see like the legs, so the big Army units running, and all the guys in the Ranger Regiment have like special outfits, and so he would have us run circles around their formation, and while they were singing songs about airborne rangers, he's like, you hear that, boys? They're singing about us. And we would literally run circles around a group running.
Wow.
And he's like, this is what real men look like. He was just a dick. I was like, all right. But he would tell us, he talked about how he got to a point where he was, lost his job, went through a divorce, on the ropes with his children. All the most important relationships to him were just not doing well. And he's spoken about this on podcasts, so I don't think he minds sharing it. But he talks about how he had a gun in his mouth and he was depressing the trigger, and then his phone rang. And it was a friend of his, like, I don't know what it is, man, but I felt like I need to give you a call. How you doing? And I just think that there's a lot of times where, like, I hope people understand, like, getting help is not, there's nothing wrong with that. And like, I talked about how I went through counseling when I was getting out of the Army. I went to counseling for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, after getting out of the Army. I remember driving away from Joint Base Lewis McChord. And for those of you guys aren't familiar, to drive from Washington to Montana, there's passes you go over, and I was sitting there. I had my car loaded up, and I had my DD-214, which is the paperwork you get once you're out. Yep. And I had basically my certificate, the non-official one, saying, "Oh, I'm out." And I just started bawling on the road because I couldn't believe it was over. And I just was like, I got out. I'm not hurt. I'm not dead. I'm like, oh my God, this is over. I can move on with my life. But for years, I had to keep going to counseling because I was so angry. And I was immediate, and I kind of still like that I have this, to be honest, because at the end of the day, I'm the happiest, nicest person. But at the end of the day, oh, let's just kill him. No big deal. It's oh, well, that's fine. But that was my go-to reaction with everything. Was I was a hammer that only saw nails, and I couldn't even go out to dinner with my friends. I remember my buddy Kobe would be like, "What are you worried? There's no one trying to hurt you here, dude. Just calm down." And so I think that that's something that for me, when I look at, kind of going what I want my kids to understand, and being a good leader is just understanding, you're saying, the trauma, understanding that people have real things in their life that influence how their decision-making process works. That's something that I don't think anyone really has talked about when we've been doing these podcasts, but it is. As I've been thinking about, I was like, man, that's a really good point, because if people can't meet you there and help you with some of those life issues, none of the other stuff's going to make a difference, So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. That's Yeah, I really do appreciate that. Well, I know we've been going for almost 2 hours now. I mean, yeah, Josie's big speaker on this episode.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just like, I don't know how to react to that.
So tell us about your trauma, Josie. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's got to be able to make jokes too. Man, I don't know if there's anything else. I don't even know where we would go from there. But I guess as we're kind of starting to descend and get ready to take this plane down, like, is there anything that you, like, again, in a perfect world, we kind of talked about earlier, you said, be better, do better, and never give up. Like, if you were out there and you got to push a message to everyone out there and they were going to hear that message, maybe just elaborate on some of that and kind of what you think that looks like.
I think it is as simple as failing forward, which I think is also a little bit of a buzzword. It might be the name of a book. But if you really want something, you probably are not going to be successful at it right away. So you just got to get yourself up, dust yourself off, and do it again.
Yeah.
I think it's just that simple.
Yeah.
But not.
It's one of those things. It's like when people talk about like being in shape, it's simple, but it's not easy. And I think that's exactly that. I'm just thinking one thing I was laughing at, I don't know why I just thought about this because we were talking about like, the personalities earlier. I feel like, you ever see that movie Glengarry Glen Ross? It's got Alec Baldwin, and there's this very famous scene where he comes in and he's talking to these sales guys and he is like beating into them. And one of the things he says, I'm here on a mission of redemption because, I'm here to save you because like they just suck at sales. He's like, if I had the tools you had, I'd be making 15 grand a night. And like one of the guys tries to step up to him is like, oh yeah, look at you. If you're so big and bad, what are you doing here? And he goes, you see this watch? And he takes his watch off. He goes, this watch costs more than your car. I drove here in an $80,000 BMW and you drove here in a Hyundai or whatever. No disrespect to drivers of Hyundais, but this was like, where an $80,000 car would be like the equivalent of probably like a $150,000 car. Yeah. But at the end of it, he goes, and if they would have taken my advice, they would have fired all of you because a loser's a loser and it's never going to change. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of my mentality on some of this stuff too, where it's like, I probably shouldn't think like that. People can change, but it is also having people in the right seats is so important. And I think that's been a thing like you've brought up to me where you're like, Robert, you're not so great at delegating, are you? I'm like, don't you call me out on my weaknesses. What are you talking about? I'm great at everything, but I feel like you've very politely dropped that a few different times. Like, I'm trying, all right? I'm trying to be better at this. But I just get like, I want it to be perfect.
I know.
I want it to be great. I want people like, I'm just like that book, Excellence Wins by Horst Schulze. I love that book. I've read it. So I've read it like probably 4 or 5 times at this point. And then like, there's another book called The Gold Standard. I think it's called The Gold Standard, but it's also about the Ritz-Carlton. And in my mind, I'm always like, you can create this amazing experience for people if you just think through everything. But then for me, I'm like, but I need to hold on to this. I need to hold on to this because if I don't do it, it's not going to be perfect. And so I'm trying to get better. I really am. So
what does that sentence, jack of all trades, master of none?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to be a jack of all trades. I'm just I see it as the system is what I'm trying to be a master of. So for me, it's hard to let go of individual steps of the system. And for me, I always just feel like, and I know this, I know for a fact now, you can outperform your competition by just thinking smarter than them. And this is something I picked up from, I referenced it earlier as the ultimate sales machine. And he talks about this in this book is like, you can outthink your competition. You can be smaller, you can have less resources, but if you are willing to outthink your competition, you can outperform them. And I've always been, we've been a smaller company. We're starting to like play in the bigger boy leagues now at this point, but for years and years, I was like, we don't have the budget to market the way these guys do. I don't have the staff. I don't have this. So, but the one thing that I think that helped me a lot was that a lot of financial advisors only want to work with like big clients. So it's like, oh, unless you have $1 million, we're not going to talk to you. Well, for me, I was so poor when I first started doing this. I was like, you want to invest? Yeah. I got something for you. I got something for you. Like everybody gets an investment. And so I was literally talking to people, driving around for people who wanted to invest $100 a month, which in this investment world, it's really like, you don't make any money on that. But I got so many reps and it helped me refine my system. And now we're at this point where I have gone through this system thousands of times. I think about it every day. I spend my first hour of every day going through our big picture projects of what is going to really move our business. And I just kind of laugh now because all these other advisors who want to be like sleek and sexy, I was just doing this earlier. I had a client, I'm not going to say the other firm's name, but it is a firm that is known for like dealing with high net worth clients. And I was talking with this other person. She's like, I think I'm going to go with them. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Let me just explain, the difference here. And just walking through, she's like, no, I think I'm going to go with you. And in my mind, I was like, she's like, you explained that a lot better. And I told her, I was like, not to take away, but like, this is a difference. I've got thousands of reps. I've had thousands of iterations to go back and look at, this didn't work. We need to tweak that, or we need to do this. And so I think that's why for me, sometimes it is hard to let go of the little things, because in my mind, I'm like, but it needs to be perfect. And it doesn't. So I'm getting better at that. But yeah, I don't know. Do we have anything else we want to hit on before we finish up? Miss Josie?
I don't know.
Big contributor over there.
I know. I'm leading this place.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like that was good.
I guess as we're wrapping up, one thing I always want people to know how to do is if they wanted to connect with you, to talk to you about coaching, if they wanted to learn, more about biz even. I know that you sometimes get married to biz, even though you are separate. Yeah. Yeah, and that, what? Before we finish off, I did write down one question. Okay. If you were talking to a small business owner out there today and you were talking to them about the benefits of being in a biz group, what would that be?
And you want me to put it into a short?
No short. We can keep talking. I mean, this is just one of the questions I wrote down and I never asked, because you also said that biz is the best it's ever been. And I wrote down, why do you think that? But I think that maybe just kind of explaining the benefits and where you see it's going, but what would that look like? How would you explain the benefits of what biz offers to small business owners?
I think it just goes to our core values. So our core values are community growth and mentorship. And the benefits come across in stories. So when I was first with biz, I started my own chapter before I came on board as a coach. And we had a member come in one day and she said, I think this is my last meeting. I don't have a business anymore. And we were like, what do you mean? And she hadn't filed her paperwork right with the state, so had received a letter from the state saying she couldn't do business. And we had two members in the room who happened to be an accountant and an attorney clear their schedules that day to make sure to help her so that she's still in business today. And that's one story. There's the story of a carpet cleaning company who could track 86% of his business to his biz chapter because of some crazy tracking mechanism that he had, who then also was able to license his business to somebody in Kalispell who's been a member of Biz to Biz for, I think, 10 years. And at one point was a member down here and in Kalispell. So the community is part of it because the people who are involved genuinely want to see each other succeed. I'm not saying there isn't ever the instance where they're like, help me, help me. I feel like it is very collaborative. We want to help each other. And the growth part of it, that we are leaning into business development, that we are saying, hey, if we can help you up level your business in the next 6 months, what would that look like for you? And encouraging leaders to get really clear on that. So we're making an impact in businesses. I think that's a big part. And then that mentorship. So not only receiving training from biz, but also receiving training from our members, because we have a wealth of knowledge from our members. So we're having trainings on AI happen in our meetings, having trainings on sales happening in our meetings, but it's catered to the people in the room and what's beneficial to them rather than taking a cookie cutter approach. Yeah. So.
No, I think that was spot on with just thinking even this last week. Wow, we sat down and, probably about 2 months ago, we sat down as a group and said, what do we want to train on? And we built out an 8-week schedule on that. And then we accomplished all those things. And I feel like they went phenomenally. And then this last meeting we had was that again. It's like, okay, this is what we have done. This is where we're at year to date. This is where we're at compared to last year. This is what's happening. Being able to track the dollars, like the biz bucks that we track, to be able to show people this is how much money that this is bringing in to members here. But then also, like you said, being able to customize, this is what we're going to do moving forward for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I really think that it, because this last week I feel like was perfect, where we had one member like, oh, I don't think that's a great idea. But just everyone being like, no, I think this is. And it's like, we're going to do this. And like just that back and forth, but then also being comfortable enough where that one member was like, okay, cool. Well, let's do this and like, let's see if it works. And I think he's going to be one of the most excited about this because I know he's very much into reading these. This is the exact type of books we're reading, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a great place to stop. We've had a great conversation here. Just as we wrap up, if someone wanted to connect with you for coaching or anything like that, what's the easiest way people could find you and how would they go about connecting with you?
So my website is sparksconsultingandtraining.com. That might be the easiest way. There's a contact us form on there, or even going to biz2biznow.com and the contact us form there. I'm the one that typically applies to everything within biz too. So either one.
I think this went great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys, for having me be part of this. Yeah.
I love just learning more about you and your story. And so thank you so much. And then to everyone out there, thank you guys. As always, if you have any questions for us at Nexus, you can reach out to myself. I'm Robert at nexuswealthmanagement.org. We'll see if Josie remembers her email address.
So feel free to reach out. I do have an email. It's josie at nexuswealthmanagement.org. And then
I knew you could do it, Josie.
Thanks.
One time we were doing it, I had to make it. It was like I was like, all right, Josie.
Take 6.
It took her
I don't do scripts.
6 times to like get her email address right. I was like, Josie, what is happening here? But you can also find us online.
This is not scripted, obviously.
Yeah, nexuswealthmanagement.org, and there's our contact for both of us. You can find either one of us. But
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.